We were approaching the end of our long journey. It was the morning of the 20th day. At noon we would reach Carson City, the capital of Nevada Territory. We were not glad, but sorry. It had been a fine pleasure trip, and we had fed fat on wonders every day. We were now well accustomed to stage life, and were very fond of it, so the idea of coming to a standstill and settling down in a humdrum existence in a village was not agreeable, but on the contrary, depressing. Visibly, our new home was a desert, walled in by barren, snow-clad mountains. There was not a tree in sight. There was no vegetation but the endless sagebrush and greasewood. All nature was gray with it. We were plowing through great deeps of powdery alkali dust that rose in thick clouds and floated across the plain like smoke from a burning house. We were coated with it like millers. So were the coach, the mules, the mailbags, the driver. We and the sagebrush and the other scenery were all one monotonous color. Long trains of freight wagons in the distance, enveloped in ascending masses of dust, suggested pictures of prairies on fire. These teams and their masters were the only life we saw. Otherwise we moved in the midst of solitude, silence, and desolation. Every 20 steps we passed the skeleton of some dead beast of burden, with its dust-coated skin stretched tightly over its empty ribs. Frequently a sullen raven sat upon the skull or the hips and contemplated the passing coach with meditative serenity. By and by Carson City was pointed out to us. It nestled in the edge of a great plain and was a sufficient number of miles away to look like an assemblage of mere white spots in the shadow of a grim range of mountains overlooking it, whose summits seemed lifted clear out of companionship and consciousness of earthly things. We arrived, disembarked, and the stage went on. It was a wooden town, its population 2,000 souls. The main street consisted of 4 or 5 blocks of little white frame stores, which were too high to sit down on, but not too high for various other purposes. In fact, hardly high enough. They were packed close together, side by side, as if room were scarce in that mighty plain. The sidewalk was of boards that were more or less loose and inclined to rattle when walked upon. In the middle of the town, opposite the stores, was the plaza, which is native to all towns beyond the Rocky Mountains, a large, unfenced, level vacancy with a liberty pole in it, and very useful as a place for public auctions, horse trades, and mass meetings, and likewise for teamsters to camp in. 2 other sides of the plaza were faced by stores, offices, and stables. The rest of Carson City was pretty scattering. We were introduced to several citizens at the stage office and on the way up to the governor's from the hotel. Among others, to a Mr. Harris who was on horseback. He began to say something, but interrupted himself with a remark. "I'll have to get you to excuse me a minute. Yonder is the witness that swore I helped to rob the California coach. A piece of impertinent intermeddling, sir, for I'm not even acquainted with the man." Then he rode over and began to rebuke the stranger with a 6-shooter, and the stranger began to explain with another. When the pistols were empty, the stranger resumed his work, mending a whiplash, and Mr. Harris rode by with a polite nod, homeward bound, with a bullet through one of his lungs and several in his hips, and from them issued little rivulets of blood that coursed down the horse's side and made the animal look picturesque. I never saw Harris shoot a man after that, but it recalled to mind that first day in Carson. This was all we saw that day, for it was 2 o'clock now, and according to custom, the daily Washoe Zephyr set in. A soaring dust drift about the size of the United States set up edgewise came with it, and the capital of Nevada Territory disappeared from view. Still, there were sights to be seen which were not wholly uninteresting to newcomers. for the vast dust cloud was thickly freckled with things strange to the upper air, things living and dead, that flitted hither and thither, going and coming, appearing and disappearing, the rolling billows of dust, hats, chickens, and parasols sailing in the remote heavens. Blankets, tin signs, sagebrush, and shingles a shade lower, doormats and buffalo robes lower still, shovels and coal scuttles on the next grade, glass doors, cats, and little children on the next, disrupted lumber yards, light buggies, and wheelbarrows on the next. And down only 30 or 40 feet above the ground was a scurrying storm of immigrating roofs and vacant lots. It was something to see that much. I could have seen more if I kept the dust out of my eyes. But seriously, a washoe wind is by no means a trifling matter. It blows flimsy houses down. It lifts shingle roofs occasionally, rolls up tin ones like sheet music, now and then blows a stagecoach over and spills the passengers. And tradition says the reason there are so many bald people there is that the wind blows the hair off their heads while they are looking skyward after their hats. Carson's streets seldom look inactive on summer afternoons because there are so many citizens skipping around their escaping hats, like chambermaids trying to head off a spider. The Washoe Zephyr, Washoe is a pet nickname for Nevada, is a peculiarly scriptural wind in that no man knoweth whence it cometh, that is to say, where it originates. It comes right over the mountains from the west, but when one crosses the ridge, he does not find any of it on the other side. It probably is manufactured on the mountain top for the occasion and starts from there. It is pretty regular wind in the summertime. Its office hours are from 2 in the afternoon till 2 the next morning, and anybody venturing abroad during those 12 hours needs to allow for the wind, or he will bring up a mile or two leeward of the point he is aiming at. And yet the first complaint a Washoe visitor to San Francisco makes is that the sea winds blow so there. There is a good deal of human nature in that. We found the state palace of the governor of Nevada Territory. It consists of a white-frame one-story house with 2 small rooms in it and a stanchion-supported shed in front for grandeur. It compelled the respect of the citizen and inspired the Indians with awe. The newly arrived chief and associate justices of the territory and other machinery of the government were domiciled with less splendor. They were boarding around privately and had their offices in their bedrooms. The secretary and I took quarters in the ranch of a worthy French lady by the name of Bridget O'Flanagan, a camp follower of His Excellency the Governor. She had known him in his prosperity as Commander-in-Chief of the Metropolitan Police of New York, and she would not desert him in his adversity as Governor of Nevada. Our room was on the lower floor, facing the plaza, and when we got our bed, a small table, 2 chairs, the government fireproof safe, and the unabridged dictionary into it, there was still room enough for a visitor, maybe 2, but not without straining the walls. But the walls could stand it, at least the partitions could, for they consisted simply of one thickness of white cotton domestic, stretched from corner to corner of the room. That was the rule in Carson. Any other kind of partition was the rare exception. And if you stood in a dark room and your neighbor in the next had lights, the shadows on your own canvas told queer secrets sometimes. Very often these partitions were made of old flour sacks basted together, and then the difference between the common herd and the aristocracy was that the common herd had unornamented sacks, while the walls of the aristocrat were overpowering with rudimental fresco, i.e. red and blue mill brands on the flour sacks. Occasionally also the better classes embellished their canvas by pasting pictures from Harper's Weekly on them. In many cases, too, the wealthy and the cultured rose to spittoons and other evidences of sumptuous and luxurious taste. We had a carpet and a genuine queensware washbowl. Consequently, we were hated without reserve by the other tenants of the O'Flanagan Ranch. When we added a painted oilcloth window curtain, we simply took our lives into our own hands. To prevent bloodshed, I removed upstairs and took up quarters with the untitled plebeians in one of the 14 white pine cot bedsteads that stood in 2 long ranks in the one sole room, of which the second story consisted.